Well, good afternoon and welcome to the first webinar of the Hesburgh Service Initiative series on care for the vulnerable. My name is Annie Enval and I'm the Service Program Director for the Notre Dame Alumni Association. Our topic today focuses on working with individuals who have physical and developmental disabilities. We're going to do a couple of housekeeping issues first. We'd really like this to be as interactive as possible, so please take advantage of Zoom's feature of a Q&A that's part of the platform here. Ask any questions that you want and we'll respond to them as they come in. We'll also have time at the end for questions if you want to hold them for the end. Please help me to please welcome Lillie and James Strasburg, Lillie Romeiser and James Strasburg. Lillie is a third-year Masters of Divinity student here at the University of Notre Dame. She's originally from Lake Forest, Illinois, which is the northern suburb of Chicago. She completed her undergrad at Princeton in 2007, and she studied theology and elementary education. She started working in this field when her high school youth minister invited her to be a buddy in Jacksonville, Florida, at a week-long residential summer camp. She also has a cousin, Josh, who has a developmental disability. James Strasburg is originally from Ann Arbor, Michigan. He's a third-year Ph.D. student in history. He did his undergrad at Valparaiso University in history and theology. During high school, he got involved working with the Special Olympics, and then he was introduced to the L'Arche communities. At this point, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Lillie and James. Go ahead.
Well, thank you so much, Annie, for having us today and for this opportunity to share with you all about our experience working with the disability community. It's been really exciting to learn about the Hesburgh Service Initiative and all that you're trying to accomplish here, so we hope that this is beneficial to you all and will help orient you as you think about serving in some of these contexts. To start off, though, we have a PowerPoint to kind of help guide our discussion today, so if we can just cue that up. That's great. I'll go ahead and let Lillie start us off here.
Great. Well, I want to start with the series of two paintings. These are 15th century paintings by a painter, I believe he's Spanish, but Andrea Mantegna. And they're a Madonna and Child, so obviously Mary with the infant Jesus. And if you take a close look, you kind of recognize in both these things there's something very interesting going on here, right? Jesus clearly is portrayed in a very unique way. And for anyone who has worked with people with disabilities, specifically individuals with Down syndrome, you'll notice that Jesus in these paintings really it's very clear that some of the physical features of Jesus' face and his eyes and his muscle tone and things like this, Mantegna painted Jesus as having Down syndrome, and perhaps he had a family member or he knew someone with Down syndrome and this impacted his vision and how he saw Christ. But I think this is a good place for us to start because thinking about my own journey, and when I first saw these paintings, my initial reaction, I was very struck by this as it being somehow wrong, or it was very alarming. It took me by surprise that Mantegna would paint Jesus as having Down syndrome. And as a student in theology and having studied this and a person of faith, I had this idea, right, that Jesus was not only God, so perfect God, but also perfect human and perfect man. And so that Jesus would have Down syndrome just felt wrong. It felt like that can't be right. What was he thinking? And inherent in this kind of judgment, the way this originally struck me was this notion that people with disabilities are somehow less perfect, right, than you or than me or than those who are able-bodied, that they're somehow like a different category almost of human being. And in a lot of ways, we see especially people with disabilities as being less valuable, fundamentally different in a lot of ways. So this has been portrayed throughout history. I don't know, James, do you want to share some examples?
Yeah, sure. So I think just from our own context here in the United States, I think one thing we see pretty clearly is for most of the 20th century, the avenue that we as a society took regarding individuals with disability was to institutionalize them. So essentially that was to push them out of our public life and contain them in controlled spaces. And so we see there a move to differentiate and to push people to the margins because of these perceived differences. I think we see that today as well, just in the fact that over 90% of babies who are diagnosed with Down syndrome before they're born are actually aborted. Thinking outside of the United States, I think globally, we might say that the United States over the last 20, 30 years has taken a lot of steps to better integrate individuals with disability into our society, into our educational system, into our health networks. But globally, I would say that individuals with disability are among the most oppressed minority groups in the whole world. And I think about just different stories I've heard from different contexts about individuals with disability being kept in dark rooms in the back of housing structures, being chained for most of their life. We'll hear a story later in our talk about a young man named Musa whose mother threw him away in the trash because he has cerebral palsy. So there's just a few examples through which we can see that because of these perceived differences between the disabled and those we think are able-bodied, it can lead to some pretty devastating consequences where the dignity of individual human beings is not always recognized or honored, and the outcomes for individual human beings with disability are also very different.
Yeah, great. We have a quote on here we wanted to share. So this is from Pope John XXIII's encyclical, and he writes, "In an ordered and productive community, it is a fundamental principle that every human being is a person. One has rights and duties flowing directly and spontaneously from one's very nature. These rights are therefore universal, inviolable, and inalienable." And I think this is really, this principle, which is one of the fundamental principles of Catholic social teaching, really sits at the heart of so much that we believe in as people of faith, as followers of Christ, and this notion that each and every person has inherent human dignity, and that underlies all of our relationships, and that this is especially needs to be recognized in the field of disability. So to sort of counteract that gut reaction that I had to that painting, right? That those picturing Jesus as having Down syndrome was somehow wrong, right? Because as if individuals with disabilities are less human or less perfect than anyone else. That's blatantly false according to the Catholic social teaching and this notion of inherent human dignity. So I think that often what will happen though is people will take this principle from CST, which is incredibly important, but they'll use it to say, oh well, then no big deal, right? There's really no difference amongst us, like we'll all just be one. We'll ignore our differences, and I think that also can be a problematic attitude to take, one that seeks to just pretend that as if people with disabilities aren't different in any ways. And so I have another quote actually we want to share first. This is from the USCCB, from the Catholic bishops, that says, "What individuals with disabilities need, first of all, is acceptance in this difference that can neither be denied nor overlooked. No acts of charity or justice can be of lasting value unless our actions are informed by sincere and understanding love that penetrates the wall of strangeness and affirms the common humanity underlying all distinction." So this notion here is that the goal is not to just necessarily ignore our differences and pretend as if they don't exist, but really recognize, one, our common humanity, our common value as sons and daughters of God, and also to recognize that there's beauty in our diversity of differences. And so this is something that was a lesson that I really particularly needed to learn, and kind of learned, not necessarily the hard way, but I'll share a little bit of my story with you and why this field is so important to me, going back a couple slides. So
Can I ask a question?
Oh, yeah, please. Yeah.
I noticed that the quote from USCCB was from 1978. That's almost 40 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
How well do you think this line of thought has been incorporated by the Catholic Church in the United States since then?
I'm not Catholic.
Yeah, I will happily answer. It's a really good question. I think the church has started to move in the right direction. Certainly, this is kind of groundbreaking. Just this pastoral statement that came out in the late 70s was very groundbreaking because up until then there wasn't a lot. I don't think. Certainly, the church was maybe leading the way in terms of service to people with disabilities, right? In having institutions that were more humane and certainly respecting and honoring people with disabilities just in the life of Christians. However, I'd say that there's been a lot of movement in the positive direction in these last 20 years in terms of especially integrating people with disabilities into the liturgy and into the life of the church. And at Princeton, I wrote my senior thesis on how people with disabilities can not only be models in a lot of ways of virtue in particular areas, but particularly how they can be models of faith and what important members of the Christian community and of the church they can be. And I think there's a lot of room that can be done left in this field. Certainly areas such as access to the sacraments, and just access and becoming active and leaders really in a parish, whether that means like serving as a lector, serving as an altar server, serving as a Eucharistic minister, and so on, and ways that the church can place people with disabilities in more visible roles so that their own spiritual gifts can really be on display, I think is an important thing. And I think the church is moving in that direction, certainly, and would love to see that continue. So.
Great, thank you. All right, continue.
Okay, well, I'll go back to share kind of my story a little bit. And we were talking about just this diversity of difference. And I think as I started working, as Annie said, with people with disabilities when I was in high school. And it was a really a good, interesting time of life, like for most teenagers, right, where I found that my life was very self-oriented. And I looking back now, I think I had a really strong set of values and things that I saw as important to me in terms of who made me who I was. And the three things that I'll talk about briefly today were intelligence, strength, or like my physical or athletic abilities, and lastly, beauty. And so, first of all, thinking of intelligence, this was important to me. I was raised in a family of good, productive, educated people, and I saw my education as really an essential part of who I was. And I wanted to be a great student. I wanted to be to go to a really good college. I wanted to excel in the classroom, and I saw my intelligence as really fundamental to who I was. And I'd say also, moving on to the next one, was athleticism. So I was an athlete, grew up playing sports all throughout my life, was a 3-sport athlete in high school, wanted to be the best athlete that I could, hoped to maybe play basketball or some sport in college, and that was incredibly important to me. And then third, like most high school students, especially young women, beauty, right? Wanting to be beautiful, wanting to be popular and liked because of how I looked, and taking that, perhaps giving that more weight than one should as a teenager. And so all three of these areas and who I saw myself to be were really challenged when I went down first to this camp in Florida and was really introduced in a more intimate way to people with disabilities, because on the outside they didn't necessarily have these traits that I saw as being so important in myself. So, for instance, I'll share, this is my cousin Josh on your screen, and Josh has just, developmental delay, and he's a couple years older than I am. And Josh, he won't have the opportunity, he's graduated from high school, but he won't have the opportunity to go to college and to have, a high-earning job the way that many of us students here at Notre Dame the way many of my colleagues at Princeton will. And I think it's so easy for people to then look down on him and to say, oh, well, perhaps his life is slightly less valuable. He's never going to go to college. He's never going to have that high paycheck. And what I've learned through my continued relationship with Josh is that Josh is incredibly, incredibly wise and intelligent in his own right, in a way that maybe won't go and sit in a college classroom and talk about some of the things that we talk about in deep theology, but that he is incredibly, incredibly bright in his own right. And Josh has taught me so much in different areas of his life, particularly in his faith and what it means to be a follower of Christ. And so I'm really grateful for Josh and all that he's taught me. The second testimony I want to share briefly is this is my friend Caitlin, who's one of our campers. And Caitlin is a dear friend of mine. She currently is a junior now at the University of Illinois in Champaign. And Caitlin had cerebral palsy, so you can kind of see from the picture her legs are pretty thin. She spent her whole life sitting in a wheelchair, and her legs are more or less unusable. She has use of one of her arms, and that's great. And so Caitlin, like I said, has been in a wheelchair her whole life. She never will go on to be a top-notch athlete the way that I had wanted to be my whole life. And every day I woke up and I took for granted the fact that I could even just walk, that I could get out of bed and that I could run and jump and play. And I met Caitlin, and she really started to transform how I saw myself and what it meant to be a person of strength, a person of athletic and physical abilities. Because although Caitlin will never perhaps run a marathon or play in a game of basketball or do some of these things that I really appreciate in my own life, Caitlin is incredibly, incredibly strong and is a great athlete in her own unique way. So a quick anecdote, Caitlin graduated from high school about 3 years ago, and she had this amazing goal that she wanted to walk across the stage to receive her diploma. And she worked for a full year training every day, or at least 3 or 4 days a week. She would go down to this treadmill and work with a personal trainer, and with assistance with like a band and full hands-on, she would train and she would walk every day. And I got to go to her graduation and to see her with her walker, unassisted, walk across that stage and to receive her diploma. And it was one of the most inspiring things I've ever seen, and one of the most incredible physical feats I've seen in a really long time. Puts to shame anything I've done, from any marathon I've run to any triathlon I've done to any game of basketball I've played in. So really transforming how I see strength. And then lastly, this is my friend Jordan, who is another one of our campers. Annie didn't mention, I help run a small summer camp for people with developmental disabilities in the Chicago area called Camp Hope. And Jordan is one of our campers at Camp Hope. And as you can see, she also is in a wheelchair. She has braces on her legs, slight just facial abnormalities. Jordan will never be on the cover of your typical beauty magazine. And I think for me as a high school student, I so wanted that validation of being beautiful and fitting in the way the women on the covers of those magazines looked. And my relationship with Jordan has taught me that that's not necessarily what makes us valuable, and that also isn't necessarily even what true beauty is. Jordan has a smile that honestly lights up a room. I'd say she's not only beautiful inside, externally, physically, Jordan is beautiful. And her smile speaks 1,000 words, and is something that has brought such joy to my life. And so one of the reasons I love working with people with disabilities is really just because it's transformed my own set of values and who not only I see myself to be and what makes me valuable, but what makes other people valuable. It's not our beauty, it's not our physical strength or athletic ability, it's not our intelligence, it's not any of these things. It's really that God has made us and created us in his image, and he's given all of us this inherent human dignity, going back to that important Catholic social teaching. So that's a little bit of my story, and I know James was going to share a little bit of his testimony as well.
Yeah, thanks so much, Lillie. Yeah, so I just wanted to share a bit about my journey to L'Arche, my journey into working with individuals with disability, and then also just share a little bit about the story of L'Arche. We go to the next slide here. The next one here. Okay. All right, yeah, common good. Great. So yeah, so I first started to work with individuals with disability in high school, and I like sports. I was also really motivated by the ideal of service. Something I was raised to believe was an important thing, an important aspect of life, and so naturally got involved with Special Olympics. And I think the mentality that could define my mindset, my approach to this opportunity really was kind of a missionary model, where I went in kind of the sense that I had the answers to bring to the problems, that I was the one there kind of sharing the joy. I was the one there to serve. And I viewed individuals with disability as individuals to be served. And as I got more enmeshed and more involved, I quickly found out, though, that the exact opposite was true. And what happened was that relationships started to be formed and friendships started to be formed. And a two-way mutual relationship started to develop between the guys on the Special Olympics basketball team and myself. And I think that this gets at, we've talked a little bit about human dignity, about diversity and difference so far. I think this gets at one more central principle of the Catholic social teaching, which is the common good. Here we just have this quote. Common good is the good that comes about in a community of solidarity among equal active agents. And for me, what really stands out is those last three words, equal active agents. And I think one of the points we want to try to offer today is working with individuals with disability is really an opportunity to enter into a really unique relationship and an opportunity to practice and live out the common good, to really recognize human dignity that we all bear, and to really enter into a mutual relationship. I want to talk a little bit about L'Arche. You know, Annie, you asked earlier, how's the Catholic Church doing? So I think we could point to L'Arche as one really positive development that in part has come out of Catholicism and the Catholic Church and is really rooted in Catholic spirituality, but that is also an ecumenical movement that's drawing from Protestant traditions and also somewhat of an interreligious movement as well. I think L'Arche really offers this model of mutual relationships, of honoring human dignity. We've talked a little bit about integration and how our society in the States, we've taken a lot of steps to better integrate individuals with disability into our social fabric, into our public life. I think what L'Arche offers it's not just a model of integration, it's I think what we could call a model of belonging. And so the idea here with L'Arche is that it's just not enough to get an individual with disability a spot at the table, a spot in a public school classroom, access into a public building. Yes, all of those steps are super vital to honoring their dignity, to creating equal situations for all individuals. But with a model of belonging, what L'Arche is saying is bring individuals with disability to the very center, to the very core of the community. These individuals who, from our perspective, bear certain weaknesses, who bear their vulnerabilities in very visible ways, but if we place them at the center of our community, a really profound transformation starts to happen. And when we start to do that, when we start to try to live out of a community of belonging, what happens is just not enough to have a place at the table. Their place is so vital. They're so essential to the vitality of a group of people that if their presence isn't there, they're so missed that the community also suffers. I think this is somewhat of a vision for moving forward that the Catholic Church offers, that Catholic social tradition. So let me give you a concrete example of how that has worked out in L'Arche. So L'Arche started in 1964 when a man by the name of Jean Vanier invited two men from an institution in France to come and live with him, 2 men with intellectual disability. Now, Jean, he was very successful at that point. He had served in the British Navy, had climbed up into the leadership ranks of the Navy. After that very successful military career, he went and got a Ph.D. in philosophy from Catholic University in Paris. He was able to secure a very nice teaching position in Canada and did very well as a scholar, as a philosopher. But by the time, I think he was about 10 years or so into his career of teaching and scholarship, he felt like something was just kind of missing. And he felt himself drawn to more spiritual work. And so he went back to France, and he was speaking with his local parish priest. And his priest invited him to come and visit one of the local institutions where individuals with disability were being housed at that time. And what Jean discovered there was just horrifying. Kind of some of these conditions we've discussed before, individuals' dignity not being fully recognized or honored, their full personhood. There weren't really opportunities to express that full personhood. It was really kind of a client-patient model, very medical setting, which is important to provide medical care, but their full personhood was not being fully honored. And so Jean started to feel this call, this pull to do something about that. And the solution he came up with was just to start small. And he invited 2 men who were part of the institution, also connected to the local Catholic parish, to move in with him, and that they were going to start a home. And Jean had some grand visions. He thought, it'd be rooted in spirituality and a shared life of prayer. And other than that, though, he wasn't exactly sure how things were going to shake out.
Decided to give it a go and have him come in?
Yep, just kind of took a chance on it. And what has happened since, this is 1964, so now we're 2016, L'Arche has grown into an international movement in over 40 countries, over 140 large communities.
Wow.
And the model that they have in place is for individuals with intellectual and developmental disability to live alongside individuals without intellectual disability. So this gets at this vision for equal active agents. Everyone has an equal stake in the life of each L'Arche home. But the individuals with intellectual disability are particularly honored as the heart of the home, as the teachers in the home. What L'Arche is trying to do is to raise up the particular gifts that individuals with disability offer to the world. So see and recognize that dignity. I think that one of the resources you also will have is this book by Henry Nouwen called Adam, God's Beloved. Highly recommended. It's not a long read. It's about 100 pages. It's written in a very accessible way.
It'll actually be part of our Hesburgh Service Initiative book club, so there'll be some resources that are posted through our website pretty soon on that.
Great.
That's awesome. I think that you'll get into the book and you'll hear Nouwen's story. I'll just offer one thought on it right now. I think Nouwen, along with Jean Vanier, kind of also reached a somewhat of a place of crisis where he had done remarkably well. He had taught at Ivy League universities. He had taught at Notre Dame for some time, but it just hadn't fully fulfilled him. And Nouwen kind of reflects that our society in some ways is built like a pyramid. And individuals with particular capabilities and abilities are able to get to the top of that pyramid. And a lot of times people are left then at the bottom. Nouwen started to reflect on the incarnation and what it meant for Christ to actually become a human being, to empty himself of his divinity and to take on the full state of a human. Nouwen identified this move as a move downward, as a move to be with individuals who are particularly vulnerable and particularly weak. And as he reflected on that, he felt this call towards L'Arche. He met Jean Vanier. Vanier invited him to come to a L'Arche home. And I think that Nouwen discovered in L'Arche in his relationship with Adam, who, from a medical standpoint, has very profound disabilities. He's not able to talk, he's not able to feed himself, is not able to dress himself. But he found himself entering into a deeply profound relationship. And he found that Adam taught him so many different things: how to be present in each particular moment, how to listen thoughtfully, how to attend to his own brokenness, his own vulnerabilities, the particular wounds in his heart that he had carried with him over the years and never fully recognized and never fully admitted that he himself was a vulnerable human being. L'Arche really provided him a context to, this is a term that Vanier uses, to become more fully human. And I think that through entering into relationships with individuals with disability, we who are able-bodied are provided with this invitation to explore other aspects of our humanity that we don't always get to exercise or are mindful of exercising. I think a lot of us tend to live mostly out of our head. That's what we're trained to do. We're trained in school to think, to analyze. If you have an intellectual impairment, if your brain is not able to, if your brain functions in a different way than what we might say is able-bodied, of course we can kind of question these categories, how helpful they are, how not helpful they are. They're there because we have language and we have to talk about ability and disability in some respect. But individuals whose brains actually work differently live out of different capacities within them. And I think one of the things that I've often seen is that individuals with disability know how to live more deeply from the heart than I've ever been able to. You know how to celebrate and how to welcome and how to express joy and anger and frustration in ways that are much more rich and deep than I've been able to. And so I think for myself, it's often, working with individuals with disabilities has often been an invitation to live more deeply from the heart and to get out of my head. I think for my own journey, trying to advance through this university setting, get a PhD, advance through academia, I often feel that pressure, I think, as now I'm felt, to get to the top of the pyramid, to define myself through my publications, through my presentations, through the scholarly knowledge that I produce. But there's a different capacity within me, within us all, that also needs to be nurtured. So I think that's a unique opportunity that individuals with disability offer us.
James, have you spent time in a large community? Can you tell us a little bit about kind of the day-to-day workings of what that's like?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So I have, and they're really fascinating places. And if you're looking to connect with individuals with disability or with a community that's close to those with disability, I would really recommend looking up L'Arche. See if a L'Arche home is in your city, your town, and they have opportunities for you to connect. So I definitely would encourage you to check it out. But they really feel like normal, everyday homes, you know, so everyone kind of has their own rhythm. L'Arche tries to connect individuals with the community in certain ways, whether that's through meaningful work or through enrichment programs during the day. Each home really revolves around the core members with intellectual disability because it's their personality that brings life to the home. And at first it might seem really mundane because you're doing just like really regular things together. You might be watching TV, you might be painting, you might just be sitting around having a cup of coffee. And the pace of life is going to feel a lot slower, especially if you're used to kind of a fast-paced environment, whether that's being a student or working in business. It's going to be a very slow pace of life. Meals are really important. Coming around the dinner table, sharing food together, cooking together. Celebration is really important. I think L'Arche does just a fantastic job of celebrating birthdays, celebrating anniversaries in the community when individuals first entered into the L'Arche home.
Random dance parties.
Random dance parties.
That's a regular part of life.
Yeah. Yeah. So they're really beautiful places, and I think I get the opportunity to teach a seminar in L'Arche every spring, and one of the things that students often share about their time in L'Arche homes, I ask them to kind of sum it up in one word, which can be a really insightful exercise to kind of hear what the students come up with. And a lot of times they say real or reality, and I think they find just a depth and a realness to life there because of just kind of the simplicity of the life, but also individuals with disability, I reflected earlier, because they bear some of their physical vulnerabilities so openly.
Yeah, I was going to comment on that and interject and say, I think that notion of vulnerability is so important because we have such a tendency to just, right, to cover up all of our vulnerabilities and to make ourselves look, and we want to, invincible, right? And we want to be productive members of society, we want to be successful, we have all these things, and we hide all of our weaknesses or cover them up and cover up our vulnerabilities. And my work with people with disabilities, like what James has been saying, has really taught me that being vulnerable is okay, and being dependent on others is okay. And this is actually the model that we have in Christ, right? And he was going back to what James said about Vanier and the incarnation, that Jesus set this example for us of becoming vulnerable, becoming disabled in a very real way. Jesus hanging on the cross is the image of a disabled God and a weak God, a broken God in many ways, and that God didn't shy away from those things, that was part of what it meant to be human, and that he embraced. And so I think working with people with disabilities is so beautiful and eye-opening because it opens us up to what are our own vulnerabilities, what are our own weaknesses, and not necessarily feeling shameful about those, but taking ownership of them and looking to others and looking to God to supply that which we lack. And that really is the beauty of L'Arche too, is that it's a community where people come together and support one another. So perhaps James is a horrible chef, right? And that's one of his weaknesses and vulnerabilities. Well, me as a core member, maybe, I can help James with his cooking, and we can together work, and he doesn't have to be ashamed of it. We work together to build up this community. And I think that's a really beautiful part of something that we can take away from people with disabilities.
James, which communities have you visited, which L'Arche communities have you visited with the Notre Dame students during the spring break trip?
Yeah, typically we go to Washington, D.C. So there are 4 L'Arche homes in D.C. 2 more are actually going to be open in relationship with Georgetown University. So it's a really exciting partnership. But there are 2 in the Adams-Morgan neighborhood, which is kind of in D.C. itself, and then 2 in Arlington, Virginia.
Okay.
Yeah.
And is that where you spent time living as an assistant, or?
Oh, I've actually haven't been an actual L'Arche assistant.
Okay.
But I have spent time with the DC communities, spent time with St. Louis community, the Chicago communities. There are other models too, of course. Like L'Arche is not the only faith-based group kind of pursuing this kind of work, this kind of life. So when I was a graduate student in Durham, North Carolina, there was a Protestant community there called Reality Ministries, and they started a neighborhood, kind of a neighborhood in the spirit of L'Arche, you could say, called the North Street community. So it's very close to that community as well.
I'd say in Chicago, if any of our listeners are familiar with Misericordia, so Misericordia has been criticized kind of because it's the largest group home for individuals with disabilities, I think in the world. I think there are about 600 or 650 residents with developmental disabilities who live there. So it kind of falls in this like institutional model, and yet many of the principles that James has been talking about with L'Arche, where a real community where people are valued for who they inherently are, is really built up. So if you're in the Chicago area, that's a beautiful place to visit and to serve and just to get to know people with disabilities, to walk alongside them, to learn of what gifts they bring to the table as well. So there are a lot of places like this.
One of the videos that is a resource for the Hesburgh Service Initiative is a Misericordia video that really highlights some of the great work that they do, and I think living in communion with one another, and the importance of everyday celebrations, and embracing, you know, we've all got something to celebrate all the time. You know, even if it feels like a horrible, no good day, there's always something to celebrate. So good. Is there anything that the two of you feel is a big challenge for you when working with these individuals? I mean, is it hard to stay on task? Is it hard to, you know, open yourself up? What would you say are some of the challenges you've faced?
Yeah, I'd say for me personally, I think somewhat setting aside this like Superwoman or Superman complex that we tend to have, right, with service. And James mentioned that it's often the case, and that when he started out working with Special Olympics, to have this notion of seeing people with disabilities as these objects for our service. And that we go into a situation and we're like, yep, I'm the Superwoman, I'm going to serve you. Like it or not, I'm going to serve you, right? You're the one who needs my help. And I think it can be hard to really change our focus away from that and from seeing people with disabilities as objects to be served, as opposed to people really to live in relationship with. And not only to serve, but to be served by, and to learn from, and to recognize what gifts, like I said, they bring to the table and what they can offer our lives. So this has been a really a big part of my own journey. I wrote my college statement for, my personal statement for college undergraduate applications on the work that I did, right, to serve people with disabilities, and very much in that model of these objects to be served. And throughout time, I've come to realize, well, you know, obviously it's good for us to serve one another, but like James said, but more importantly, how can I live in relationship, and how can I not only serve, but how can I receive and respect people for the gifts that they offer? So I think that's one of the biggest challenges for me is not just always wanting to do, you know, whether it's feeding one of my campers or bathing one of my campers, but really just even in those moments of service, what is this person offering me, and how am I growing and benefiting from this relationship, and keeping that relationship really at the heart of the work. So.
Great. James, any thoughts on that?
I mean, Lillie, I think you captured a really central theme and part of my own experience too. You know, I think that I remember in high school and even in college, you know, I just kind of being nervous beforehand, not really knowing how to act, or kind of wondering what will this be like, what kind of, you know, what will our interactions be like, what's expected of me. And I think that's, you know, natural in a lot of different settings to have those questions. But I would just say that it's an invitation to be yourself. You know, I think one of the things I've always really appreciated about working with individuals with disability, spending time with them, being with them, is they see me as James and as their friend, first and foremost, as this person who's with them. You know, they're not really asking me like, oh, you got a Ph.D. from Notre Dame, oh, you got a graduate degree from Duke University, like all of these things that I kind of surround myself with, kind of create my identity, to present myself, to kind of create this really positive, rosy picture. All of that kind of gets pushed out of the wayside. So being willing, it's a challenge to let all that down. And just kind of say, hey, I'm just here, I'm with you, I'm spending time with you, and I'm just going to offer who I am. I don't have to kind of
they don't care about your CV or your resume. They don't care you know, about,
which is really freeing, I think. And I think for Nalin and Venier, it was a very liberatory moment for them too. Yeah.
And it kind of boils things down, like what James said earlier, to just like, will you love me, right? Yeah. It's not, what are you going to offer me? We have such this like production-driven society. What are you going to offer the world? What are you going to offer your job? What are you going to offer your family? Working with people with disabilities, that's not really the case. The question is always, will you love me? Will you be with me? Will you value me? Mm-hmm. It's not based on what we can produce, but who we are. Mm-hmm. I think that's really beautiful.
And looking at, sort of the idea of our alumni clubs around the country doing service projects and going out and, trying to make a lasting change in their communities. If a club, let's say, decided to work with an organization such as L'Arche or Misericordia or Special Olympics, what advice would you give them? Perhaps it's similar to what you would tell your SSLP students who are going out on their summer service project to live in community with these individuals. But what advice or cautions or celebrations would you suggest that they go for?
Yeah, great question.
Yeah. Get ready to have fun. Yeah. I think that's key. I hope we've kind of interrogated this idea of service a little bit. Yeah. I think a lot of these organizations and groups really do have needs that an alumni club or a group of students can really help meet. So, when we go down to L'Arche in DC, we do a lot of kind of painting and cleaning. So definitely be ready to kind of roll up your sleeves and help out in that regard. But I think just to kind of reiterate what we've been saying, be ready to enter into a relationship and to allow those relationships to change you and to offer yourself in return. Kind of talked about this idea of mutuality, the two-way street. So, and I think that is just a good practice for any service opportunity.
Sure, absolutely. So, yeah. Lillie, do you have
I'd agree. Probably not. Just reiterate. I would be reiterating whatever he said. So.
Yeah. Okay. So be prepared to have fun. This would be a great fun opportunity for our clubs to engage in. Okay. Great. Did you have another slide that you wanted to bring up?
We wanted to close with this video. So this is a video from made by a Notre Dame alum, correct, right? Mike McDonald, who has spent time at various L'Arche communities throughout the world, but particularly at the L'Arche community in Kenya. And this is based on some of the relationships that he formed there. So we'll let the video speak for itself.
Okay.
Mimi jina langu ni Musa Kiokote. Halafu hapo pasi nimezaliwa Kisumu, alafu natupua. Mtu anakuja kuchukua, ninaishi na mama yangu. Natoka kwa mama yangu nakuwa mkubwa. Naishi Kenya. Rafiki yangu.
A lot of people really ask what kind of disability Musa has, and we could summarize it. If really he has a disability, then his disability is having abnormal joy.
Nafanya mambo mengi. Kupika chakula, kupika keki na biskuti. Napenda kuishi sana.
Every day Musa invites us to actually make choices in life. You can choose to mourn about all the things you don't have, Or you can just choose to dance to life and be happy. At least there are certain things you have.
Mimi naombanga Mungu kwa chapo. Mungu anapenda mimi sana. Sana kabisa. Hivyo. Napenda Mungu sana. Baba yangu.
Musa, I think, in my opinion, has been created this way and brought to us as a gift. If there are people out there who think and who feel and they are convinced that they have nothing to live for, I would invite them to encounter Musa. Musa will tell them, look here, you have everything to live for. You have a purpose. You are complete. Everything that has happened to you with a purpose, only to make you a better person. And you have everything on earth to live.
Great.
I want to keep it on. There's little
The outtakes.
outtakes.
Yeah.
So let's keep watching it for just a second.
Yeah.
Ooh. Okay, so at this point, just a couple of questions for you guys. What do you think you've learned about yourself through this work? What would you say is kind of the highlight?
I think for me personally, I love this video because it talks about Musa really as a gift, and that Musa's life reminds us that each of us are gifts, and by encountering people with disabilities, we recognize not only that they are gifts, but that we also are gifts. And I think that's been a really wonderful part of my own journey of me learning to really value myself, to value others as unique gifts from God, and to really begin to place my value in the right things, as opposed to, like I said earlier, in my intelligence and in my athletic abilities and my beauty, whatever it may be, right? To just know that God's created me as He has, and that I have so much to offer the world just because I am who I am. So.
James?
Yeah, I think just to kind of tie back to a theme I talked about earlier, is just have learned to live more deeply out of my heart as opposed to my head. And I think just two quick stories of time I've spent with some of my friends with intellectual disabilities. So there's Fritz, who lives in Washington, D.C., and I've tended to be fairly frugal individual throughout my life, and like fairly utilitarian, and Fritz loves to buy flowers. And so I maybe buy flowers for my mom on Mother's Day, really special occasions, but it's if I bought flowers out of the ordinary, kind of run-of-the-mill everyday life, it'd be a very unusual occasion or event. But Fritz loves to buy flowers all the time, and he just loves to just kind of be with them, look at them, just soak in all their beauty. And he shares flowers with people, and he just slows down every day to stop and look at his flowers. And so Fritz has really taught me to just kind of be a bit more slow in life and to appreciate beautiful things.
Yeah.
And that spending money on flowers is a worthy thing to do.
Sure.
And one story about Andrew also, who lives in Washington, D.C., just it's like a great connector, loves to introduce everyone to everyone. Even if you've been introduced like 10, 20 times before, like he will introduce you again.
Oh, yeah.
And so I think Andrew has just invited me to value connection with others and to make those connections. I kind of am astounded how often like I don't take the initiative to introduce myself to someone in the room or someone I'm spending time with, but like not really formally connected to. Yeah, those two examples.
Okay, great. Well, I'd like to open it up again. If anyone has a question who's viewing this live, you can use the Q&A feature through Zoom to submit your questions, and we'll be happy to take those for the next couple of minutes. So, give it just a minute and see if anybody puts one in. We're having some really beautiful weather today, preparing for Mother's Day. I think that we'll luck out with some gorgeous, you can send some flowers to your mom, James.
Yeah, maybe it's buck up.
I do that.
Those in there, yeah.
Can't wait.
So, all right. Well, we don't appear to have any that are coming in right now, so. I'd like to once again thank Lillie and James for spending time with us today and for participating and supporting the Hesburgh Service Initiative through this webinar. We hope that you will take some valuable information away from this as well, and that you can take back to your alumni club or to your colleagues or friends or whoever you would like to share the information with. For those of you viewing live, you'll receive a link to a short survey to gather some feedback after today's webinar. For more information about the Hesburgh Service Initiative and our other things that we have going on with the Notre Dame Alumni Association, I invite you to check out my.nd.edu and click on the Service tab up near the top. We'll have some specifics about future events through the Hesburgh Service Initiative, as well as I mentioned the book club discussion on Henry Nouwen's Adams. So thank you again, and have a wonderful day.